Alright, here we are in Photoshop to take our rendered elements and add a little bit more polish and finalize them. And so I've taken my image, and the first thing I want to point out is kind of break a common misconception that adding a little bit of Photoshop and doctoring or touching up your renders is cheating somehow. Definitely not the case. Pretty much all your finished renders should have some Photoshop and some cleaning in it. Everything is composited, everything is, photoshopped and fixed up a little bit. It's common practice. Every image you put in your portfolio on your website should probably have a little bit of Photoshop touch-up if you can. Anyway, what I've done so far is just add these little bits of detail here on the grill and then on the little center cap of the rim, and just 2 seconds to do a Google image search and then slap that thing on there. Much faster than actually modeling it out and texturing it, even though obviously that'd be the best case scenario. So once I've done that, and to make sure it's tasteful, the worst thing is getting caught in your Photoshop. So if there's any chance at all somebody might catch you, then you're doing something wrong or you're doing too much Photoshop. But hopefully this looks sufficiently natural on the model. So what I'm going to do now is bring in my ambient occlusion pass, and so I'm selecting all, and I'm going to drop that on there. Just shift and then drag that layer and drop it in here. And right now I can make it a multiply pass, and you can see the difference there, how it's adding a lot of shading information that we didn't have before. Maybe a little bit too dark, so what I'm going to do is go up to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, and I'm going to take this middle bar here and I'm going to slide it a little bit to the left, basically bringing my center point, to the left, and bending things towards the white side, so it's lessening the effect but still keeping the darkest darks. That's why I use level instead of just brightness and contrast, because I don't want a linear function. I want just to bend the average, if that makes sense. So there, I'm pretty happy with that. So we've got our ambient occlusion, but I got a problem here. I don't like the way that it's covering up my light. I've got this like dark shadow over the top of a bright light, which looks unnatural. So I'm going to turn my ambient occlusion off, the layer off for right now. Go back to my Beauty Pass layer, and I'm going to do a select by color range, and I want to select this mid, orangish or yellowish color here, and get myself kind of a small selection. Okay, and I want to blow that up and fade it out some, so I'm going to select and expand probably about 5 pixels or so, and then I don't want that harsh edge, so I'm going to go to Select, Modify, and Feather by about 6 pixels. Okay, and now I'm going to bring back my ambient occlusion and just push the delete key to just basically punch a hole in my ambient occlusion pass, and just pushing delete several times just to get rid of it. And there you can see I've brightened it back up. So I'm pretty happy about that. And now what I'm going to do is take these bright highlights and make this car look really extra shiny, and really pull some of those white speck hits out a little bit more. So once again I'm going to turn off the ambient occlusion, and I'm going to go up and just do another select color range again, but this time I'm going to pick white. So over here in my swatches, my color swatches, I can just get pure white. I don't need to sample off the image, and I'm going to get kind of like the lower, just the really bright whites. So I'm going to crank my fuzziness down to like, I don't know, 70 or so, and once again modify and expand it, just real small amounts here. I want it pretty tight, and then feather it, definitely over feather it for a bloom effect. Alright, and now once I've got that selection made, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a brand new layer on top of everything else, and I'm going to fill it with that white color. So I can either go to Edit Fill, or I can hold Shift and Backspace to bring up this window. And I want to fill with my foreground color. Okay. Now I'm going to deselect that, but you can see this is pretty harsh there. So I'm going to make this a hard light pass, and I'm going to tone the opacity of this layer way down to like 30 or so, just real subtle. This is a very subtle touch. It's easy to get carried away, and hopefully this shows up well in the podcast, but I just want to point out how subtle this needs to be. And so I'm down to like 20 right there. And then we're going to, make that invisible. And I'm going to go back to my beauty pass, and I'm going to do the same thing all over again, selecting white. This time I want a little bit more fuzziness to get able to capture a little bit more of that white. Let's try 130 this time. And now select and expand. Let's try doubling the values to 8. And then the feather, and double that value to 16. And then I'm going to create a new layer once again and fill it pretty much exactly like we did before, but now you can see we're covering more of an area. And I'm going to make this a soft light and add in my hard light. And you can see that's just really bringing out those white highlights. And then when I turn my ambient occlusion back on, also I've got, my bloom is going right over the top of that ambient occlusion pass. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's looking pretty good. That's definitely like made some of my highlights pop. I've got this nice sheen coming off the surface over here. And then if you really want to tweak this, really get touchy about it, use your tablet, and you can use your airbrush tool. And sometimes what I'll do is set this to color dodge under my brush settings. Make sure I've got a nice soft airbrush selected. Yeah, color dodge, and I bring the opacity all the way down to like 7 or 8%, just really low. And then what you can do is go through like in your beauty pass layer. I'm actually gonna make a duplicate of this, and just kind of brush it really finely and really get like a solid control of your specular hits. So sometimes I think I've got a little bit carried away there, but basically you get the idea. If you really want to bring some particular area out, you might want to try playing around there. I just made this area in the back a little bit brighter, brighten up this foil on the front end here, and you can do those kinds of things too. And alright, so I'm seem to have a little bit overboard here. I'll use my blur tool to kind of smooth some of that out, some of that graininess. Fortunately, we're relatively low resolution, so we can get away with a lot here. So I'm pretty happy with that. Once I've got everything kind of the way it should look, a couple of last touches. You can always add in, some kind of icon or whatever in the background. Don't get too carried away. But what I am going to do is take my airbrush tool back to normal and get a big, thick airbrush. I'm going to get it more than that. And I'm just going to hold down the shift bar and just darken this whole bottom and probably leave the top. And I'm just kind of adding an element in here that will draw the eye back towards the car. And from a distance, I'm pretty happy with that. You can always check your image in Photoshop. You can push F to make it full screen, and just kind of keep pushing F to cycle it around, and then Tab you can always push to hide your bars. So sometimes I'll just do this, to show off work or whatever, just to look at it without any kind of distractions, to really take a final, go over it with my critical eye. So I can still see there's probably some parts that could use a little bit more polish, but for now I'm pretty happy with that. And we're going to call that a wrap. So hope you found this useful, and I hope you get some really nice renders coming out.